We almost erased them. The first human transmission arrived buried beneath a cascade of cleaner signals, harmonic greetings, mathematical symphonies, carefully modulated proofs of intelligence from species eager to be welcomed. By comparison, the human signal was an offense to our sensors. It was loud, asymmetrical, emotionally unstable, the sort of broadcast young civilizations sent before they learned restraint. An intern flagged it for deletion. It survived only because it crossed my console. I am Talaris Vesh, Senior Archivist of the Virelian Union, tasked with cataloging emerging intelligences before they become problems. I remember pausing the automated filter, more annoyed than curious, and isolating the signal. Earth, third planet, high gravity, violent weather cycles, tectonic instability so extreme it fractured continents like brittle bone. Life expectancy short, biology inefficient. A death world curiosity, nothing more. Yet when I opened the transmission, I did not find the usual pleas for guidance or cautious introductions. I found noise, music, unrefined, rhythmic, layered with emotional crescendos that spiked without warning. Visual records followed, their planets scarred by war, cities burning, oceans choked with debris, skies torn apart by crude machines they hurled at one another. They showed us their failures. That alone unsettled me. Most species curate their first impression. They hide their violence. They present unity, peace, and careful optimism. Humans did the opposite. They displayed their worst moments openly, without apology. Interwoven between scenes of devastation were images of rebuilding, hands lifting rubble, voices singing amid ruins, small figures standing defiantly before overwhelming destruction. And threaded through it all was a message, repeated in countless dialects. We are here. Not we seek permission, not we come in peace. We are here. The council analysts dismissed it within minutes. Psychological immaturity, they said, aggressive self-image. Earth was assigned a low observation priority. The file was scheduled for archival stasis. I should have agreed. I should have closed the record and moved on to more elegant minds. Instead, I watched it again. Something about the transmission resisted classification. The emotional volatility should have marked them as fragile, yet there was coherence beneath the chaos. Intent. The humans were not boasting. They were not threatening. They were announcing survival, as if existence itself were an act of defiance. Weeks later, fringe reports began to arrive from the outer trade lanes. Human-operated freighters, unremarkable vessels by Union standards, were surviving radiation storms that stripped shielding from automated probes. One ship limped into port trailing half-melted hull plating, its crew broadcasting laughter through open comms. Another lost 3 hands to decompression and held a memorial service before resuming its route. They recorded their grief.
Publicly. I remember replaying one such log, my sensory tendrils tightening as a human voice cracked mid-sentence. No attempt to mask the emotion, no ritualized restraint. This was not how stable species behaved. It was how stubborn ones did. I flagged Earth's file, not for threat level escalation, but for unpredictability. That alone was enough to earn me a formal reprimand. Archivist Vesh, the council reminded me, chaos burns itself out. I wanted to believe them. Yet the more data I gathered, the more the pattern emerged. Humans did not optimize for safety. They optimized for continuity. Where logic dictated withdrawal, they adapted. Where systems failed, they improvised. Their technology was inelegant but resilient, layered with redundancies born not of foresight, but of repeated catastrophe. They learned by surviving mistakes that should have ended them. The Union classified this as inefficiency. I began to suspect it was something else. On the night cycle, when the human file was finally sealed, I hesitated before authorizing the archive lock. The transmission replayed silently on my console, burning cities, defiant music, fragile beings standing against their own annihilation. For the first time in centuries of service, I felt an unfamiliar sensation ripple through my neural core, unease. We had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. We believed we understood the pattern. But as I closed the record on humanity, a thought surfaced unbidden and unwelcome. Species that survive despite themselves do not disappear quietly. We should have watched them more closely. We should have listened. Because that crude, emotional signal was not a greeting. It was a warning. And it was only the beginning. They did not arrive in fleets. That was the first thing that confused us. Human vessels entered Union space singly or in small, mismatched groups. Patched holes, outdated drives, transponders that stuttered as if unsure they belonged among us. No banners, no demands, no formal petitions for recognition. They came quietly, filing labor requests through minor trade guilds and frontier authorities that barely warranted council attention. The galaxy barely noticed. At first, neither did I. Humans took the jobs no one else would. Hazard routes skirting pulsars, deep core mining stations where gravity pressed down like a physical hand intent on crushing bone, maintenance contracts on aging orbital platforms whose automated systems had failed too many times to trust. They worked where others calculated unacceptable loss probabilities. By our measurements, they should not have endured. Their physiology was fragile: soft tissue, exposed sensory organs, skeletal structures that fractured under forces many species considered tolerable. Their lifespans were brief, their reaction times unremarkable. The data did not lie. And yet, the humans stayed. I observed them aboard mixed species stations under the guise of routine ethnographic analysis.
They stood out immediately, not in stature or strength, but in behavior. They moved quickly, inefficiently, colliding with bulkheads and one another, laughing even as they apologized. They bled easily. I saw it happen often. A slip, a misstep, a moment's inattention. Crimson fluid where other species leaked nothing at all. What unsettled me was not that they were injured, it was that they did not stop. A human engineer with a fractured limb continued rerouting power conduits with one functional hand. A pilot flew a cargo hauler through unstable gravity shears while receiving medical treatment mid-flight, voice tight with pain yet steady enough to joke with their crew. Sleep cycles were treated as negotiable, exhaustion as an inconvenience. Station commanders complained constantly. They argued with machines. They cursed at failing systems as if insult might coax obedience. They mourned their dead openly, without ceremony, without shame. Grief echoed through communal corridors in ways that unsettled more reserved species. And yet, morale improved wherever they worked. Stations with human crews reported fewer total failures. Response times to emergencies shortened. Crews stayed longer. Turnover rates dropped. Even species known for isolation found themselves sharing meals, conversations, stories. Humans filled silence with presence, whether invited or not. The Council's assessment did not change. Useful, the report said. I told myself this was correct. I reminded myself that adaptation did not equal superiority, that stubbornness was not strength, that survival alone was not exceptional in a galaxy filled with ancient species who had mastered it long before humanity ever ignited its first engine. Then came the Valdrin collapse. It began without warning. A region of space long considered stable fractured under a cascading subspace failure. Gravitational harmonics destabilizing navigation fields across 12 systems. Automated fleets vanished mid-transit. Ships emerged from jump lanes inside stars, inside moons, inside one another. Communication arrays overloaded and fell silent. 3 Union fleets were erased in a single night cycle. Veteran species panicked. Doctrine failed us. Our automated systems, proud achievements of millennia, could not adapt quickly enough to conditions that rewrote themselves by the second. Command AIs froze, locked between contradictory threat assessments. Crews trained for precision found no footing in chaos. I was monitoring emergency channels when the first distress signals flooded in. Then, one by one, they stopped. Silence spread across Valdrin space like a held breath. And in that silence, a signal appeared. Crude, unstable, human. A battered cargo vessel, registry barely legible, emerged from the collapse zone trailing debris and radiation burn. Its hull was scorched, several compartments vented to vacuum. Life signs flickered erratically. And still, it broadcast.
"We're still here," the message repeated, voice distorted but unmistakably human. "Multiple survivors, navigational failure ongoing." Against all logic, the ship maneuvered, manual corrections compensating where automated systems refused to function. The crew ignored standard jump protocols, riding the edge of gravitational anomalies with instinctive adjustments no simulation had prepared them for. They should have died. Instead, they adapted. As rescue operations finally penetrated the collapse zone, more human signals appeared. Not many, but enough. Each carried the same message. Not pleas for extraction, not accusations, just confirmation. We're still here. I felt a chill ripple along my neural crest as realization set in. Humans had not survived Valdron because they were stronger. They had not outmatched the collapse with superior technology or foresight. They survived because when systems failed and certainty vanished, they did not wait for permission to act. They did not freeze when doctrine collapsed. They moved. The Council convened an emergency session in the aftermath. Their role was acknowledged with muted approval, no commendations, no elevation of status. The official narrative credited eventual stabilization to Union resilience and delayed automated recalibration. I watched the human crews disembark in triage bays, burned, exhausted, grieving, and accept this indifference without protest. They helped one another off stretchers. They checked on non-human survivors before themselves. One human, barely conscious, reached out to steady a shaking Virelian medic. I should have felt relief. Instead, unease deepened. Because for the first time, I understood the pattern I had missed. Humans did not define survival as the absence of failure. They defined it as what came after. And as I closed my report on the Valdron collapse, I realized something far more troubling than any threat assessment. If the galaxy ever faced a disaster that could not be solved, only endured, humans would not ask if it was possible. They would simply decide to remain. And I feared what that meant for all of us. We called it cursed. Not officially, of course. The Virelian Union did not believe in superstition. We believed in diagnostics, probability curves, and fault trees that could be traced back to a single, solvable origin. And yet the Axiom's wake defied all of them. She was a new vessel, Union-built, multi-species rated, equipped with a third-generation navigation intelligence capable of adjusting to quantum shear in real time. Every system passed inspection. Every simulation predicted flawless operation. And still, she would not launch. The first failure was dismissed as calibration error, the second as software lag. By the sixth aborted attempt, silence had crept into the command deck. 6 species had tried to pilot her. Each followed protocol with religious precision.
Each reached the same point, ignition alignment, and watched the systems lock themselves into non-response. No alarms, no catastrophic faults, just refusal. The navigation AI remained polite and unhelpful. All parameters within acceptable ranges. Launch not advised. A ship that did not obey was an embarrassment. I was present as an observer, assigned to document the anomaly for archival review. I remember standing at the rear of the bridge, watching as yet another pilot relinquished the chair in frustration. The air was thick with restrained tension, the kind born when certainty erodes but pride refuses to follow. That was when the human spoke. She was not assigned to the launch crew. In fact, by Union classification, she was not qualified to sit in the pilot's chair at all. A systems engineer, human, seconded to the dockyards for maintenance oversight. I had seen her before, moving through access corridors with grease-stained hands and an expression of constant, quiet focus. "Permission to try," she said. The words were simple, improper, almost laughable. The bridge fell silent. The station commander turned slowly, disbelief radiating from every rigid line of his posture. "You are not cleared." "I know," the human interrupted, not disrespectfully, but firmly. "But your systems are fine. The ship's fine." Several officers bristled at the phrasing. Ships did not fight. They malfunctioned. I should have agreed. Instead, curiosity rooted me in place. Against protocol, and I suspect against better judgment, the commander allowed it. Perhaps desperation had finally eroded doctrine. Perhaps the growing list of failures had made the impossible feel tolerable. The human approached the pilot's chair. She did not rush, did not perform the ritualized preparations other species favored. She sat as one might sit in a familiar place, adjusting the seat with small, unconscious movements. Her hands rested lightly on the controls, not gripping, not commanding. The moment her biometric signature synced, the ship changed. Power flumps stabilized, minor oscillations in the reactor dampened without instruction. Error codes vanished from auxiliary displays, as if embarrassed to have existed at all. A low harmonic hum sped through the hull, a sound I had not heard from the Axiom's wake in all previous attempts. Whispers rippled across the bridge. The human did not initiate launch. She leaned forward slightly and spoke, not in command phrases, not in coded instruction. "Easy," she murmured. I know. My sensory fronds stiffened. She was talking to the ship. The navigation AI responded, not verbally, but through subtle shifts in output, micro-adjustments, manual pathways opening where automation had previously locked them down.
The human compensated instinctively, fingers dancing across controls in ways no standardized training taught. She anticipated hesitation before the systems registered it. That's better. Ignition sequence initiated. Every officer on the bridge froze. The engines did not surge. They eased into power, harmonizing across systems that had never aligned so smoothly under automated control. The Axiom's wake detached from the dock with a grace that felt almost deliberate. She launched flawlessly. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then panic erupted, not fear of catastrophe, but of implication. Officers shouted readings, demanded verification, re-ran diagnostics already proving what we could all see. The ship obeyed the human. No, more troubling, it cooperated. The human pilot exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders. "She doesn't like being rushed," she said, as if explaining a minor inconvenience. "Your AI's great, but it tries to force perfection. This hull's been through too many microstresses." "Let her." The words echoed in my mind as the Axiom's wake completed her initial trajectory and awaited further instruction, systems purring with unsettling contentment. The commander ordered the human to stand down immediately. Protocol reasserted itself with brittle urgency. She complied without argument, rising from the chair and stepping aside. The moment her presence disengaged, the systems remained stable. The ship did not rebel. That frightened me more than failure would have. In the days that followed, investigations consumed the dockyards. No faults were found, no code anomalies. The official conclusion cited previous operator incompatibility and quietly amended training parameters. Unofficially, a different understanding spread. Humans did not dominate machines. They listened to them. They worked around flaws rather than erasing them. Where Union design sought absolute control, humans accept imperfection and adapted in real time. Their survival on a hostile world had taught them that systems, biological or mechanical, rarely behaved as intended under stress, so they learned to feel deviation. That day shattered a foundational belief of the Union that superior technology guaranteed superior outcomes. The Axiom's wake had not refused us because she was broken. She had refused because we demanded obedience where cooperation was required. As I finalized my report, I watched the human engineer leave the dockyards, already reassigned, already fading back into obscurity. No commendation, no inquiry into her methods, just quiet discomfort from those who had witnessed the impossible. I archived the incident under anomalous human-machine interaction, flagged for future correlation. But privately, a far more dangerous thought took root. If humans could do this with our ships, with our systems, our safeguards, our certainties, what would happen when they were asked to guide something far more fragile, like the galaxy itself?
And somewhere beyond Union space, other human hands were already reaching for controls we did not yet realize we would one day surrender. They warned us, not once, but repeatedly, through fractured diplomatic channels, unsanctioned intelligence briefs, and private conversations our ambassadors dismissed as emotional overreaction. The humans had encountered the Devourers before we had named them, skirmishes on the dark edges of mapped space, lost colonies that went silent without explanation, patterns the humans recognized not as misunderstanding, but as hunger. "They won't negotiate," the human envoys said. "They don't want territory." The council listened with polite detachment. The Devourers, after all, displayed rudimentary communication bursts, simple signals interpreted as territorial claims. According to Union doctrine, that made them rational actors. Appeasement protocols were drafted. Observation fleets were dispatched. Humanity's insistence on preemptive defense was cataloged as species-level aggression bias, born of their violent history. I sat in the chamber as the vote passed. Caution over confrontation. Dialogue over deterrence. The humans left early. The first border world fell 3 cycles later. The Devourer biofleets did not arrive as ships, but as living tides, vast organic constructs that ignored shield harmonics, rewriting themselves mid-impact. Union defenses, calibrated for known threats, failed catastrophically. Cities vanished beneath creeping biomass. Atmospheres ignited as if consumed from within. Entire populations were absorbed before evacuation orders cleared bureaucratic channels. Our doctrines unraveled. Automated defense grids attempted negotiation protocols until they were physically dismantled. Fleets trained for precision warfare hesitated when Devourer formations shifted unpredictably, sacrificing limbs to open killing vectors. Command algorithms could not classify intent when intent itself was annihilation. Panic spread faster than the invasion, and in that chaos, the humans moved. Before the Council convened an emergency session, before revised threat assessments could be approved, human fleets were already in motion. There was no unified command, no ceremonial declaration of war, just action. Ships launched from wherever humans were stationed, trade hubs, repair docks, half-finished dry berths.
They were not impressive vessels. Human warships were a patchwork of eras and philosophies, outdated hulls reinforced with illegal armor, civilian craft bristling with improvised weaponry, engines tuned beyond safe tolerances. Their formations made no sense to our tacticians. They broke apart, reformed, charged, withdrew, and charged again. They should have collapsed under Devourer assault. Instead, they adapted. I monitored the conflict through intercepted human communications, unable to look away. Their channels were chaos, overlapping voices, laughter bleeding into screams, orders punctuated by apologies and promises.
A pilot joked about overdue maintenance moments before ramming her ship into a Devourer node. A commander paused mid-battle to acknowledge the loss of a wingmate, then issued new coordinates with renewed ferocity. They were afraid. They fought anyway. Union fleets engaged alongside them briefly, but our losses mounted quickly. Standard formations disintegrated under organic swarm tactics. Shield failures cascaded. When command predicted total fleet loss, retreat orders were issued. The humans did not follow. I watched, stunned, as Union fleets withdrew to regroup, and human ships surged forward to fill the vacuum. They knew they could not win outright. Their transmissions made that clear. What they sought was time. 12 hours, one human strategist repeated across open channels. For 12 hours, the humans held the line alone. They burned through ammunition, hulls, and lives with brutal efficiency. They baited Devourer tendrils into traps that destroyed both predator and prey. They sacrificed ships without hesitation if it meant slowing the advance by seconds, minutes, anything. Those 12 hours allowed evacuation corridors to stabilize, allowed defensive platforms to recalibrate, allowed billions to escape worlds already half consumed. When Union fleets returned, reinforced, and reconfigured, they found the battlefield transformed. Devourer momentum had stalled. Human losses were staggering, entire squadrons erased. Comms channels fell silent one by one. And yet, the remaining human ships continued to broadcast. Not calls for aid, not demands for recognition, but status reports and encouragement. Something inside me fractured as I listened. We had believed emotional volatility made humans unreliable. We thought fear compromised decision-making. We believed discipline required detachment. We were wrong. Fear, for humans, was not a weakness to be eliminated. It was fuel. They felt the cost of every loss and chose to fight harder because of it. Where our commanders hesitated to preserve fleets, human leaders committed everything they had, trusting that survival demanded sacrifice before calculation. When the Devourer advance finally broke, when their biofleets recoiled under sustained counteroffensive, the humans did not celebrate. They counted their dead, quietly, methodically, with reverence. The Council issued commendations after the fact, formal gratitude, strategic reassessments. It all felt inadequate, hollow in the aftermath of what I had witnessed. As casualty numbers finalized, I found myself staring at the projections in disbelief. Humanity had lost more proportionally than any other species in those opening engagements. And yet, without them, the war would have ended before it began. That realization lodged in my mind like a shard of ice.
Because if the humans had been willing to give everything before we believed the threat was real, what would they do next once the galaxy finally understood what they had been trying to tell us all along? The Devourers had announced themselves, and humanity had answered. The war had truly begun. Victory arrived slowly, not in fanfare or celebration, but in silence. The humans had held the line. The Devourers had recoiled. Worlds were not yet lost. And yet, when I reviewed the casualty reports, I felt something I had never experienced in centuries of archival duty: shock. Entire regiments erased. Ships, some barely out of construction yards, lost in a single engagement. Medical base overflowed, unable to treat the numbers pouring in. Red lights blinked constantly in makeshift field hospitals as triage crews, both human and non-human, struggled against a tide they could not stop. I watched holographic projections of corpses and injuries scrolled endlessly across my console. And still, the humans refused to yield. I observed a human private, slumped against a scorched bulkhead, arm shattered, blood pooling across his chest. Evacuation drones hovered, ready to extract him to safety. He shook his head, weakly, insisting another injured soldier take his place. "I've got time," he muttered. The drone complied. He was left bleeding,
alive but barely. Across the battlefront, I recorded a human commander addressing her crew through open comms, her voice trembling with exhaustion and grief. She did not promise victory, did not assign blame, did not sugarcoat Beth. She promised meaning. We are here because each of us matters. Fight for that. Fight for each other. The Union, belatedly realizing the stakes, extended a formal military alliance. It was too late to erase the shame of ignoring their warnings. Humans accepted without resentment. No triumph, no triumphal rhetoric, just quiet acknowledgement that they had already shouldered far more than we had. This frightened me more than anger ever could have, because the humans were not fighting for logic or for protocol or even for survival alone. They fought because giving up was impossible. Hope could vanish, supplies could fail, comrades could die, but surrender was unthinkable. I recorded, in astonishment, that for the first time in history, a species continued fighting after hope had statistically evaporated. They moved forward, bloodied and broken, not because they expected to survive, but because the alternative, the acceptance of failure, was unendurable. And that defiance, that relentless insistence upon existing in the face of inevitable loss, did not go unnoticed by the devourers. I observed their advance slow, hesitation rippling across their formations, subtle but deadly. In war, hesitation is death. Humanity exploited it. With losses mounting and reserves exhausted, they adapted strategies in real time, improvising maneuvers no tactical AI predicted.
They leveraged fear, grief, and despair as fuel, turning what the Union once classified as emotional instability into an instrument of survival. I realized then what the Council had failed to comprehend. The humans did not need hope to continue. They did not require certainty to act. They fought not because the galaxy had promised them victory, but because they themselves demanded it. And that, above all, made them a force no algorithm, no doctrine, no simulation could ever fully anticipate. The war's trajectory had changed, and the Union, long confident in its calculated superiority, had only just begun to understand why. Black Halo was supposed to be our grave. The combined Union fleet had converged there, dozens of species, tens of thousands of vessels, every tactical doctrine applied with clinical precision. Yet when we arrived, the Devourers were already waiting. Their biofleets formed a living net, stretching across every approach vector. Shields failed to respond. Coordinated maneuvers were anticipated and countered before they began. Our fleet commanders exchanged messages in disbelief. This was not battle, it was predation. I observed from a rear command station, sensors locked onto the chaos. Panic reverberated through command channels, but one voice cut through the static. A human strategist, young and relatively untested by Union standards, she proposed the impossible. Her plan was simple in description, absurd in execution. Weaponize fear itself. The human fleet would abandon conventional formations, intentionally appearing disordered, chaotic, even vulnerable. Sensors would register patterns too erratic to classify. Manual overrides would be prioritized over AI guidance. Ships would sacrifice themselves in controlled detonations to overload Devourer sensory nodes. No simulation supported this. No doctrine sanctioned it. All established tactics predicted total annihilation. And yet, she persisted. Human captains listened, not blindly, but with the fierce trust bred from years of surviving impossible conditions. Orders were given. Engines were pushed beyond recommended limits. Hulls were exposed to radiation pockets deemed fatal. Crew members accepted near certain death for moments of advantage measured in seconds. The battle began, disorder incarnate. Ships rammed Devourer tendrils, detonating at precise moments to collapse sensory networks. Feints drew predators into traps lined with the burned husks of human vessels. Pilots calculated trajectories manually, adjusting in real time as systems failed or misread signals. Communications overlapped in cacophony, shouts, curses, laughter, and sobs, all guiding action with terrifying clarity. I watched in horror and fascination as entire wings of human ships ignited, their hulls consumed, only to explode at moments that shattered enemy coordination. The Devourer fleet faltered, unable to comprehend the erratic tempo of the attack. Their advance became hesitant, tentative.
They misread the patterns, miscalculated distances, collided with one another. Black Halo, a station that had seemed doomed from the outset, survived wave after wave. Human ingenuity twisted chaos into a weapon, each act of desperation precise and terrifyingly effective. Hours passed, By Cycle 6, the Devourer assault had fractured. Their biofleets recoiled in confusion, abandoning attack vectors that had promised total destruction. Sensors registered victories the Union fleet had thought impossible. When the dust settled, Black Halo remained, intact, occupied, secure. In that moment, the Union's understanding of intelligence shifted. Algorithms, doctrine, and prediction were not enough. Order, no matter how perfect, could not account for the unpredictable ingenuity of a species that embraced imperfection. Sometimes, survival demanded madness. And for the first time in history, I recognized that humans, through chaos, fear, and sheer refusal to yield, had not only survived, they had rewritten the rules of warfare. From the ashes of what should have been our extinction, Black Halo became proof. In the galaxy's calculus, logic was insufficient without courage, and certainty could never triumph over the unpredictable will of those who refused to die quietly. The war ended, though no one announced it with ceremony. The Devourers retreated, scattered and diminished, not because the Union had outsmarted them, but because humans had refused to let hope be the only variable. And in the aftermath, we expected the humans to demand recompense, territory, political authority, the spoils of a species that had borne more than any other. They asked for none of it. Instead, human representatives requested memorials for the fallen, aid for reconstruction, and shared defense packs to prevent such destruction from ever happening again. Their worlds were scarred, cities flattened, orbital facilities reduced to skeletal frames, entire sectors left uninhabitable for cycles, but the humans began rebuilding immediately. Children played among the ruins, laughing as if joy itself could resist entropy. Music echoed through refugee halls, sometimes clashing with the wails of mourning, but never yielding to despair. I interviewed survivors, both those who had fought and those who had endured occupation and evacuation. They spoke not of vengeance, not of hatred, but of lessons learned. They told of cooperation across species, of bonds formed under fire, of lives saved because someone refused to step aside. Their language was quiet, their emotions measured, but beneath the calm, I detected the unbroken spark that had carried them through the war. Humans had changed. They were harder, quieter, more deliberate, but they had not bent, not once. The Union, however, was irreversibly altered. Hierarchy shifted, command protocols evolved. Tactics and doctrines that had once relied on rigid logic were revised to accommodate the unpredictable ingenuity humans had demonstrated. Across the galaxy, other species began to whisper the same unsettling thought I had recorded in my own logs. A species once dismissed as fragile, primitive, and erratic had proven that endurance alone was insufficient to explain survival. It was meaning, the attachment to one another, the deliberate choice to protect and honor life, that had made the humans unbreakable. Not strength, not technology, not doctrine, but the simple, terrifying insistence that their existence, however brief, mattered. I realized then what no simulation could have predicted. The humans did not endure because it was logical. They endured because they cared. And in that care lay a weapon more formidable than any fleet, any AI, any strategy. The galaxy had met them at their worst, and they had endured, not for victory, but because every life counted. And that, I understood finally, was why we would never be the same. I write this not as propaganda, nor as praise. I write this as a record, warning and truth, etched in the sensors and logs of a galaxy that once underestimated them. Humans are not perfect. They are volatile, reckless, and sometimes unbearably emotional. Their decisions are driven by impulses that other species would label irrational. They quarrel over inconsequential matters, cling to sentiment where logic demands detachment, and bleed freely, physically and emotionally, without apology. Yet in the face of darkness, in the moments when civilizations teetered on the brink of extinction, they acted with clarity that no algorithm could replicate. They do not ask if survival is logical. They ask who needs them. That simple distinction reshaped the Union. Fleets now wait for human strategists. Ships request human pilots, even when their skills are technically redundant. Warnings from the fringes, emerging threats, destabilized colonies, unclassified anomalies, carry weight only once a human voice confirms the interpretation. Across councils and war rooms, their presence dictates strategy. They do not demand it. They simply act, and others follow. We once believed ourselves ancient, wise, and insurmountable. Centuries of doctrine, of perfected algorithms, convinced us that logic and order were sufficient to preserve our dominion. The humans demonstrated that wisdom without courage is fragile, that plans, no matter how elegant, collapse without those willing to act when certainty fails. I have observed them in moments that would have shattered any other species, grief-stricken, bloodied, exhausted, and yet they stand. They repair, they rebuild, they fight again. Not because they are the strongest, not because they are favored by probability, but because their instinct, honed through millennia of hardship, refuses to yield. If the next great darkness comes, and I am certain it will, I know who I want beside us. Not because their bodies are the toughest, nor their vessels the most advanced, nor their numbers insurmountable.
I want them because they will stand when strength fails, when the galaxy's calculations have declared extinction inevitable. Humans endure because meaning drives them. Loyalty, courage, defiance, and love are their engines. And in that, the galaxy has learned a lesson it cannot unlearn. That survival is not merely the domain of the strongest or the wisest, but of those who will refuse to disappear, even in the shadow of annihilation. In all my years as archivist, I have documented civilizations that rise, civilizations that fall, and those that vanish without trace. Humans are none of these. They are a force that reshapes history, not because the universe grants them power, but because they demand to exist. And so, the galaxy follows their lead, not blindly, not without question, but with a reverence born from witnessing a species that will stand when all others falter. Because if courage alone could tip the scales of fate, it would be theirs. And now I record it for posterity. When the darkness comes again, it will be humans who show the way.